What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 80. As you guys can see, I am ready to go. Got a nice coffee over here to my right. We had the very rare no UFC action taking place this past weekend. Again, that's extremely rare these days. You guys know there's a UFC event pretty much every single weekend throughout the entire year these days. So, you know, we're itching to see some UFC action take place this upcoming weekend. I like this card. It's not the most stacked of cards, but I do feel that the matchmaking was done very well. There's a lot of fights, you know, that I look through this entire card that I say to myself that, you know, they did a wonderful job with the matchmaking, especially on the prelims as well. I mean, Chris Gutierrez versus Montel Jackson, that fight makes so much sense. I love the Montana De La Rosa versus JJ Aldrich fight over there, and in the women's side of things. There's just fights that make a lot of sense. Of course, Grant Dawson and Bobby Green will be fun. Buckley versus Morono, Algeo versus Hernandez. It's just so many fights that it just seems like the fighters were meant to eventually face off in the octagon against each other, if you guys know what I'm talking about. So excited to talk about all these fights. We'll start at the bottom of the card. We'll work our way up to the top. You guys know how it goes. If you're looking to work with me, do not hesitate to reach out to me, whether it's through email, Instagram, or Twitter. It's all scrolling below. I'll have some great action locked in for this card. And then besides that, we've been doing very well overall. It took a horrendous DQ on Jacob against Jacob Malkoun to prevent me from bringing in major units in the last card. You guys know that was completely bogus. Other than that, though, we've been really hot over the past couple months, so looking to continue that right into this card. And then last thing I'll tell you real quick before we jump into this first fight, if you're looking to sign up for a new sports book, Bovada.lv is a sports book I highly recommend. Just reach out to me if you're interested. Let me shoot you my referral link over, and I will give you my official plays for this entire card for free, and you will have an additional bonus added to your account. All right, guys, with no further ado, let's jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we head over to the women's flyweight division, where I should note real quick, if you didn't hear, Dana White has stated that there will be a trilogy match between Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko, the two queen pins of the division. Here we got Montana De La Rosa taking on JJ Aldrich. Two very recognizable names. I think this fight makes a lot of sense. One thing that stood out to me as I'm taking a look at both these fighters, look at the age on both these fighters. Even though they've been around for quite some time, Montana De La Rosa still only 28 years old. So much room for growth. And then you got JJ Aldrich, 31 years old, creeping into the prime of her career. Both these fighters have really grown up inside the octagon. You're going to continue to see better versions of them. And, you know, first and foremost, you know, Montana De La Rosa, you take a look at her recent record. She hasn't had her hand raised very much. She had an impressive victory over Ariane Lipski, where she finished her. And we should also note that Ariane Lipski just defeated JJ Aldrich. But you take a look at the losses. They have been against high-level competition, in my opinion. She's really been thrown in there with the Wolves as of recently. Lost to Tatiana Suarez. Went to a draw with... excuse me, I'll pull it up here real quick. Went to a draw with Mara Bueno Silva, a very good fighter. Lost to Macy Barber. She showed a lot of toughness in the Barber fight. She had a broken nose. She was all bloodied up, continued to hang in there, went to a decision. Viviane Araújo is a very good fighter as well. These are high-level fighters, so just note that real quick. JJ Aldrich, yeah, she's coming off an amazing finish, but, I mean, take a look at the level of competition. Na Liang, that's all Liang does is get finished. And then before that, she had the loss against Ariane Lipski. The Blanchfield loss, obviously the Blanchfield loss, you know, Blanchfield, in my opinion, is the uncrowned champ. So that, you know, that's another high level opponent. But before that, some good victories. I would say the Jillian Robertson victory was the biggest victory she's had as of recently. Vanessa Demopoulos, we'll be talking about her here in a second. Not overly impressed there. You know, we'll cut to the chase here. Montana De La Rosa, I think she's going to have the wrestling advantage in this matchup. I think she could have some success getting this fight down to the mat. That could obviously pay dividends in this fight. You guys know I've always been a big fan of Jillian Robertson's boxing, and she's very technical. But the thing I don't like about the thing I don't like about JJ Aldrich at times she seems to flake out and fizzle. And we saw that in her matchup against Macy Barber, where she had a lot of success early. And then once Barber started to push the pace on her, she basically broke down. I don't like that aspect of her game, especially when you're versing a girl like Montana, who's as tough as it comes. And that's going to lead me to edge Montana here. You mix in the wrestling and the toughness. I think those are two slight edges that she has, whereas JJ has that technical striking edge. But I think Montana De La Rosa is just going to be in her face. And then again, I talked about the fact that she's so young and green, and I think we're going to see major growth in her game. She's married to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in De La Rosa. Excuse me, his name's slipping me here, his first name, but a former UFC fighter who has since been cut. What the hell's his name over here? I don't know. He did good though. He snatched up a good one there. Mark De La Rosa. So, and another thing just to note too is that Montana has a nice long frame for this division too. She will have a slight reach advantage in this matchup here, very slight reach advantage, but just know that she's been working on her striking and she throws those nice long straight shots, and she could land on Aldrich as well. So, and I know Montana De La Rosa was putting in some work over in Colorado for some time, really working on her cardio. I do believe as of now though, she's back in Texas, and I am going to edge Montana De La Rosa to get the job done here, just being the more mentally tough fighter. And as this fight gets to the second round and the third round, I think she'll edge this fight out with that toughness, okay? But you also have to be wary. JJ is a very sharp striker, and Montana is there to be hit. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Montana bloodied up a little bit, but I'm going to say that she pushes the pace with her wrestling and just pushes the pace throughout this fight and edges it out, okay? Right now, Montana De La Rosa is a plus 106 dog. So I think there's some slight value there. I think this is a very, very close fight. And I think this is a fight that I would say the value is definitely on the dog when you see a matchup that's as close as this. Do I see a finish here? I mean, this isn't necessarily the type of fight I would say I would want to target to see a finish. I mean, Montana De La Rosa has some sub skills. 6 of her 12 victories, half of those victories have come by way of sub. And she looked good against Lipski when she got that finish there. JJ's been finished 4 times out of her 6 losses too, so we have seen her kind of crumble at times. Wouldn't be shocked, but it's hard to favor a finish these days with these types of fights. But give me Montana De La Rosa to get the job done, and with that slight value on her dog line. We'll stay in the flyweight division. We'll head over to the men's side where we have Nate Maness taking on Mateus Mendonça. Now, Mateus Mendonça just tasted defeat as a pro for the first time. He had a very tough challenge in front of him, though, taking on Javid Basharat. The Basharat brothers are the real deal. Basharat really controlled that fight, had a lot of success getting the fight down to the mat and just really controlling the pace of the fight. Mateus, another young and dangerous fighter fighting out of shoot box, and you guys know that shoot box is just pushing out these young savages that are going out there and just looking to go to war. These fighters that are extremely dangerous all around, but specifically with their striking, I would say for the most part, right? I mean, they come out and they look to slug it out. Mateus has real pop on his shots. He has some serious power. 3 knockouts, 3 subs, also showing some diversity in the way he gets the job done with the 3 decisions as well. But again, understand that he can crack. He could definitely crack. I could easily see him going out here and finishing this fight, setting it up with landing some big shots on the feet. You think about the performance that he had on Dana White's Contender Series, where he had the first round knockout over Ashik Ajim, which is a fighter that was really being hyped up on the regional scene for some time. Remember, Chael Sonnen was hyping him up, and he wasn't necessarily just some slouch, and he went out there, starched him. Nate Maness, on the other hand, he's an underrated fighter in my opinion. I do believe that Nate Maness is a decent fighter, especially when you take a look at what he was doing recently, besides his last performance, because I want to talk about that here in a second. But, went out there, got a knockout over Tony Gravely, submitted Luke Sanders, took out Johnny Munoz, who we will be talking about here in a second, went to a decision against Umar Nurmagomedov. Not a lot of people can say that they can go to a decision with a guy like Umar. He survived in that fight, and he showed his toughness. But then he goes out there and gets submitted by Tager Ulianbekov very, very quickly. And I thought that performance was quite alarming. And that definitely made me take a step back on my respect for Nate Maness, at least when it comes to his ability in the cage. Mateus Mendonça, I just believe that he's just going to be a little bit quicker with his striking and just a little bit quicker anywhere this fight goes. I wouldn't even be surprised if he snatches up a sub as well, just mixing things up. And it's just really hard to go against these young, promising shoot box fighters. Again, there's just so many promising fighters coming out of there. And I would say Mendonça is actually one of the more promising fighters coming out of shoot box. So, he's been preparing with Charles Oliveira and all that. And, Charles has a huge fight coming up. So, yes, I definitely have to take the Brazilian here. I think that he's going to be ready to go. He's going to be ready to get that first UFC victory. He's extremely hungry. Again, you take a look at the age, too, 24 years old. You're going to see a step up in his skill set. He's going to learn from that loss. And, stepping in there, going 15 minutes with a guy like Basharat, too, will definitely sharpen you up. Now, I'll say this much. Nate Maness right now, my bookie is a plus 200. I do believe the value is on Nate Maness with the way that the line is looking. Mateus Mendonça is as high as a minus 263. That line's too high for my liking. You're talking about a flyweight match where two guys that could really scrap it out. There's a lot of variables. Again, Nate Maness is also a tough dude that is decently well-rounded. He can crack on the feet. He's had some big knockouts. We talked about the Gravely knockout. The value is on Nate Maness, but I will take Mateus Mendonça to get the job done, and I will take him by finish. Hard to say whether he gets a sub or a knockout. I could see him hurting Nate Maness and maybe snatching a sub up, or just working the grappling in too, potentially just sneaking off a sub. I guess I will side more so a submission, but I sense the finish for Mendonça, and I sense that he gets that first victory in the octagon. In the women's strawweight division, we have Kanako Murata making her return back to the octagon, coming off a little bit of a layoff due to an injury, taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. The former LFA champion. She came from that LFA scene where Kanako came from, more so from the Invicta scene. I believe she had some big fights over in Ryzen as well. Murata, 30 years old. The last time she was in there, what like I said, was quite a bit ago. That fight took place in the middle of 2021. All right, so it's been a while since she's been in there. She was injured in that fight. Before that, though, victory over Randa Marcos, the very tough Marcos. Victory over Emily Ducote. I believe that, yes, that was a 5-round championship match there where she edged out Ducote. Ducote, listen, you guys know I've faded her at times, but you guys know she's actually a decent fighter, right? I mean, that's a reputable victory there. So she has been in there with some. At least she's been inside there with a recognizable name when we're talking about Ducote and Marcos, because other than that, not a lot of big time names. We're not talking about Angela Magana. We're not going to bring her up if you guys remember her from The Ultimate Fighter back in the day. So here's the thing. Vanessa Demopoulos obviously has very good jiu-jitsu. She's extremely flexible. She's very tough. We've seen her go to war. Even when you think about her fight, even outside the UFC, she had that war with Philipe Gutierrez, where she lost the belt, but showed her toughness there. She is willing to brawl it out. Defensively, she's very, very vulnerable. From the striking defensive standpoint. I mean, she can be tagged up. We've seen her cracked with shots. Even when you think about the big victory that she had when she fought that Argentinian chick, I'll pull it up real quick, but you remember when she pulled off the sub in that fight, she was dropped in a brutal way, that was against Silvana Gomez Juarez. I mean, once again, showing that she is there to be hit. Just is coming off a loss against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, another fighter that we'll be talking about here in a little bit. There's a lot of names just circulating fighters that are on this card. So, the thing is that I do believe that Murata will have the better striking. Vanessa might have some of her own success with the aggressiveness that she has, but I could easily see Murata tagging her up there. And then I could also see Murata using her wrestling to get on top of Vanessa Demopoulos. And as long as she avoids being submitted, she'll be in control of the fight. She will be the fighter that's on top. She'll rain down a little bit of ground and pound here and there and whatnot. It's kind of hard to win fights when you're on your back. Vanessa Demopoulos does spend a lot of time on her back. And she also spends a lot of time on her back inside the octagon as well. So, here's the thing. As much as I would love to take Vanessa Demopoulos here, she represents Greece to an extent, right, of being a Greek American. You pull up her Tapology page, she has the Greek flag. I believe that she's brought the Greek flag in the octagon. Nowadays, the UFC doesn't let them bring the flags in. Nothing but respect towards her way. But I just think that Kanako Murata, even coming off the long layoff and whatnot, when you break down the tape on these two fighters, I think you got to lean Murata here. So that's definitely what I'm doing. Murata right now is a big time favorite. She's as high as a minus 397 on Jazz Sports. She opened up as a minus 250. A lot of action moving towards her way. And again, when you break down the tape, I think you can understand why. I think that if Demopoulos is going to pull this fight off, I think she really has to have success with her jiu-jitsu. And I don't even mean just pulling off that sub, which would be great for her, but she's going to have to use her jiu-jitsu to, either transition back up to her feet and try to be aggressive there, or try to pull some type of reversals off and get on top and get to a significant position where she could snag some rounds. And I don't really bank on that. So give me Kanako, Murata, and keep an eye on the somewhat powerful southpaw Murata to land some big shots on the feet, bloody Demopoulos up, and maybe drop her in that fight. But overall, yes, I will say decision victory for Murata. Demopoulos is tough, even though her striking defense is bad. Johnny Munoz taking on Aoriqileng Aori, fight taking place in the bantamweight division. Remember now, Aori started off his UFC career fighting in the flyweight division, where he went 0-2, but was fighting some legitimate competition in Jeffrey Molina and Cody Durden. I would point to the Durden fight. Even though he lost that fight, came down to the third round. I believe it was 1-1 going into that third round. I would actually say that fight showed some of the abilities that he has in a positive light, because he was looking good early on in that fight. He's aggressive with his striking. He's decently well-rounded, and kind of faded late in that fight. And I think that was partly due to the reason why he made the decision to go up to the bantamweight division, where he then knocks out Cameron Else and then gets a decision victory over Jay Perrin. Two lower level fighters, really not UFC caliber fighters, and then makes the mistake of walking into a counter shot from Iman Sahabi. Sahabi, a very cerebral fighter there. I think that Aori is very hungry coming into this fight. He knows he needs to go out there and get the job done. Johnny Munoz is a fighter that really relies on his jiu-jitsu. I'm not really overly impressed with his striking. I know he's been working on it, but I'm still not overly impressed with it. He's also a fighter that we've seen get put out in his own right. If you remember when Gravely knocked him out, I think that there's a much more likely scenario of Aoriqileng Aori knocking out Munoz than Munoz catching him with a shot, even though Aori is also coming off that knockout loss. But I still think that Aori will be the more dangerous striker here, and I think that Aori will be able to avoid the mat. Johnny Munoz will try to pull some tricks out to get this fight down to the mat. He's tricky. He'll look to get the fight down to the mat in some unorthodox type of ways, maybe against the cage, sinking some hooks in and trying to drag the fight down to the mat, maybe even pulling guard or something like that. But I think Aori will be able to avoid that, and I think he'll just be a step ahead with the striking. I could see him landing some good shots there. So I do like Aoriqileng Aori to get the job done here. Let's go take a look at the betting line. This is a line that's very close, depending on what book you're looking at it. It's essentially a pick'em line on the majority of books. You look at Bet Any Sports, minus 115, 115. Over here on my sports book on Bovada, he opened up as a minus 150. Did Aori. He's now a minus 110. So action going on Johnny Munoz Jr. I don't really care about that. I've been breaking down tape on them, and it's not really the greatest thing when you see action going towards the other way. But I stick to what I'm seeing. I like Aori here. I think he has an avenue to just land heavy on the feet and just kind of get the better of the striking. So obviously I do feel with this line now being a pick'em, I do believe there's value on Aori over Johnny Munoz Jr. Sticking in the bantamweight division, we have the number 15th ranked bantamweight fighter in Chris Gutierrez, who's coming off a tough loss against Pedro Munoz. And then you got Montel Jackson, who still hasn't cracked the top 15. And that is obviously based on his activity. Still 31 years old, still has some time to step up the activity and really make a run in this division. He's extremely talented. This is a fighter that is averaging, maybe just more than one fight per year, realistically. Look over the last 5 years. I think over the past 3 years, he's had just about 5 fights, right? So he's averaging just a little bit more than a fight per year, but that's obviously on the low end. I would love to see Montel Jackson step in there much more frequently. He's a very fun fighter to watch. Big time power, good striking skills. He's a good wrestler as well. He has some offensive wrestling. And that's definitely an avenue that he's continued to work on, his submission skills and all that. He's a very complete, well-rounded fighter. One thing that he was always known for, or is known for, is the size of his hands. The comparison of his hands to a Francis Ngannou. I believe he has the same size hands as Francis Ngannou, which is kind of crazy when you think about that. Just a freaky frame, and he uses that to his advantage. When you see him in those those grappling and scrambling positions. When you see him have that baseball grip on someone's wrist or their hand, he's trying to pry it apart. It's crazy when you see how big his hands are, ripping them apart there. So Chris Gutierrez, like I said, coming off that loss, a very technical striker. I love the leg kicks that Gutierrez throws out there. How about the spinning attack that he landed against Dana Baccarel? That was a fight that he was kind of down early on. Baccarel was the aggressor. I remember that fight very vividly. It just recapped that fight a little bit here, but I had an official play on Gutierrez. He was an underdog in that match, and eventually he set up that knockout over Baccarel there. We finished him in the second round. After that, had the knockout over Frankie Edgar. Not saying much. That was a horrible matchup by the UFC. Frankie shouldn't even have been fighting at that point in time. So, those two knockouts there. But before that, you got to go all the way back to the Vince Morales knockout in 2020. Went to a draw with Durden. That says something. Victory over Andre Ewell, Felipe Coleres. I think realistically, when you take a look at Chris Gutierrez's resume, it's not as impressive as some of you guys would think that it should be. Ranked 15th. He's a guy that gets a lot of respect. I mean, I think it's just based on his exciting striking type of style. But I think Montel Jackson's going to be a little bit too much for him, man. Let me cut to the chase here. I think Montel Jackson could just mix things up. I think he's better everywhere this fight goes. If Chris Gutierrez is able to keep the fight standing and they go tit for tat on the feet, I think Montel Jackson will use that ridiculous reach advantage, an 8.5-inch reach advantage. He throws very straight shots with his hands, and I could see him tagging Gutierrez up from the outside, and I think that we'll see a very frustrated Gutierrez. That's what I see happening with this fight here. So let's take a look at the betting line. Montel Jackson is a minus 189 on Jazz Sports, and he opened up as a minus 219. Action going towards Chris Gutierrez's way. Again, I think people see the name Chris Gutierrez, they see the rank next to his name, and they understand he's a respectable fighter. It's also worth noting that he was dropped by Pedro Munoz. Munoz is a very tough fighter that brings it, but I think that Montel Jackson is a step ahead of Munoz right now. Munoz, nothing but respect towards his way. I've met him. He's a great dude, but Montel Jackson's the younger, more dangerous fighter right now, and I think that will prove when we watch these guys scrap it out this upcoming Saturday. Give me Montel Jackson. Chris Gutierrez, he has proven to be a very tough fighter. He's only been finished once throughout his career. It might be hard for Montel Jackson to get that finish. I think Gutierrez can survive, but Montel Jackson will put it on him here. And I like Montel Jackson. And, anything under minus 200, if you're looking to target him, I would want it under that minus 200 line. So, check the lines there. He is available as low as a minus 185. So, that line wouldn't be bad at all as well. But give me Montel Jackson to get the job done. In the women's strawweight division, this is a very interesting matchup, if you ask me. You got a lot of contrast between these two fighters here. Diana Belbiţă, 10 years younger than Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who Kowalkiewicz is now 37 years old. Now, that statistic would definitely point towards a benefit in Diana Belbiţă's way, for sure. But if you take a look at the level of competition that these fighters have fought throughout their careers, it is definitely going to point towards Karolina Kowalkiewicz's way. This is a fighter that has fought the best of the best throughout the years. She's been in there with Alexa Grasso, went to a decision with her. She's been in there with Jessica Andrade, Claudia Gadelha, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Rosa Namajunas, Randa Marcos. I mean, I'm skipping over names. I mean, there's a lot of respectable names all throughout her resume here. And then when it comes to Belbiţă, you're not really talking about anything much. She's coming off that victory against Maria Oliveira. I don't put much weight onto that victory there. The victory over Hannah Goldie, we saw what Goldie's about again the other week, looking horrible. She lost to Gloria DePaula, Liana Jojua. That was a really bad loss. She made that mistake, stuck her arm in there, got submitted. She lost to Molly McCann. The biggest name on her resume is going to a decision loss with Molly McCann. So you need to understand that you're talking about two different types of fighters from that aspect. But yes, the age discrepancy does somewhat balance things out a little bit. I understand it. Belbiţă is a very aggressive fighter. We saw that against Maria Oliveira in that last fight. She's going to look to hang in there. I think she's going to be mentally tough here, and she's going to go out here and try to bring the fight to Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Kowalkiewicz has shown some defensive striking deficiencies as of recently. We've seen her get tagged up a little bit. But the thing that stands out to me right now with KK is she was really going through it for some time, man. She really was. She was on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fight losing skid. But again, look at the level of competition. Grosso, Yan Shonen. That name always gives me a problem there. Excuse me if I know I'm probably not saying that perfectly, but Yan Shonen, she's very good. Jessica Andrade, Michelle Waterson, even Jessica Penne was not the best of them, but things were looking horrible for her. But then she bounces back with a 3-fight winning streak. She defeats Felice Herrig, submits her, defeats Silvana Gomez Juarez, and then she defeats Vanessa Demopoulos. Okay, I think that it really showed the mental toughness that Karolina Kowalkiewicz has, and I think that she's fully back. She's fully back in the sense of with her confidence in the cage. She's confident once again, and I think that in a fight like this, she knows and she believes that she is the superior fighter, and I expect that confidence to come into the cage with her. Okay, so yes, I am taking Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I think that she could have success on the feet. I think that she could land on Belbiţă. And I also believe that she could pull off a submission on Belbiţă. If this fight goes down to the mat, I think that Karolina Kowalkiewicz's jiu-jitsu will be a step ahead. And I'll say this much, though. Belbiţă, man, I enjoy watching her fight. I'll tell you that. All right. I know she's not the most talented fighter, but I love the look. I love the toughness. And, I hope she could hang around in the octagon. Just 27 years old. And, look at that hair, man. That hair all the way down to the ass there. All right. So who are we going with again? We are going with Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and she is roughly a minus 180 favorite right now, which you can argue is a little bit of a steep line for this division. A lot of these fights play out closely, especially if you want to put her under a microscope with that little losing streak she had. But again, take a look at the level of competition. Belbiţă is not that. I don't have a problem with where the line is on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I think she's a step ahead, and I wouldn't be surprised if she pulls off a submission in this fight. Okay, if she doesn't get that sub though, I think she'll get her hand raised, even if it goes to a decision. But give me Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Even though she's 10 years older, she's creeping on 40 years old. I think she'll still be fresh for this fight. Bill Algeo welcomes Alexander Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez dropping down to the featherweight division here. You guys know he's been a long-time lightweight fighter. Definitely has had his ups and downs. The ups, we start with his UFC debut where he goes out there and knocks out Beneil Dariush, takes that fight on short notice. I mean, what a way to kick things off. But then again, he's definitely had some major L's as well. And let me also note the victory he had over OAM. I know that fight wasn't the most exciting, but still to go out there and take out a guy like Olivier Aubin-Mercier. He's fighting outside the UFC these days, but that's a very hard guy to defeat. The Donald Cerrone loss, without a doubt, was the biggest blemish on his career. He had so much to gain there. He was talking all that shit at the press conference and got picked apart, bloodied up. The Francisco Trinaldo fight, you guys know he should have lost that fight. There was a combined 2 significant strikes thrown throughout that entire fight, and Trinaldo was the fighter that threw those 2 strikes. And that was a real taste of a hometown advantage there for Hernandez. But knocked out against Dober, bounced back with the knockout over Grutzmacher, knockout over Mike Breeden. Just really realistically, his most recent victories have been against low-level fighters. Now, the Jim Miller fight, that was a close fight, right? That fight could have went either way. Jim Miller is a legend. He's very old, though, but still, that's a respectable victory. And, Bill Algeo is a fighter that's had his success as well. Bill Algeo, he comes into the UFC, or he came into the UFC with that decorated Muay Thai background and that decorated jiu-jitsu background. This is a guy that's just very decorated in that sense, and he's a good fighter. This is a fighter that's going to really give you a run for your money if you back him. He's very tough. He's very mentally tough, and he's very tricky. At times, we've seen wrestling give him a little bit of issues. I would say that the Spike Carlisle loss that he took was due to a little bit of a lack of strength that he has in there at times. But you know what? Hernandez is dropping down in weight. I'm curious to see how he's going to look on the scales with this weight cut. I think Bill Algeo will be the more fresh fighter. Algeo's been looking sharp as well. Like I said, he's tricky. And coming off that submission victory over TJ Brown, the Andre Fili fight was very close. That was a split decision fight there. Knocked out Herbert Burns before that. Has a decision victory over Joanderson Brito. Not a lot of guys are going out there defeating Brito these days. Excuse me, I'm sorry. He did edge out Spike Carlisle. I stand corrected. That fight was extremely close. But at times when he was kind of going through some turbulence in that fight, it was due to his takedown defense. Spike kind of pushed him against the cage, had some takedowns there, but eventually, that's right, he was the fresher fighter, had better cardio, and he actually had his own success in the grappling department as well. So yes, I mean, Bill Algeo, much respect towards his way. I like Bill Algeo here. I mean, look at the stats on him here. Landing 5.93 strikes per minute. He's very, very active on the feet. He's a very accurate striker. I could see him landing on Hernandez. Hernandez has had his moments, his flashes with his power, but a little bit more of a bulky, clunky type of striker. I think Algeo could be slicker there. And then even if Hernandez tries to push the route with the wrestling, I don't think he'll have too much success there. Algeo's tricky, and Hernandez better watch himself. So Hernandez also absorbing slightly more strikes than Algeo. I like Bill Algeo here. I do. I think he's just the more fine-tuned fighter all around. He's currently a minus 129 now on Jazz Sports. He opened up as a minus 140. It initially dips the other way where he touches a minus 150. Then now it's going back up towards Hernandez's way. Keep an eye on how Hernandez looks on the scales. See how the weight cut's going for him and whatnot. But he's a very professional dude in that sense. I think he'll be ready to go as far as that's concerned. But I just think that Algeo will just be just a little bit more game and a little bit more sharp. That's why I'm edging Algeo here. So now, how do we see this fight taking place? Do we see a finish coming? I mean, Hernandez has shown to be tough, right? We've seen him tagged up before in fights, and he's been tough. He's sturdy. He'll hang in there. I'm not so sure if I see Algeo getting that knockout, but I could potentially, I'll lean more towards a decision. I just see Algeo kind of piecing him up. I see this being a fun fight, a grueling fight, but I don't want to lean towards a finish here. Give me Algeo via decision. Philipe Lins taking on Ian Cutelaba. Fight taking place in the light heavyweight division. And Philipe Lins has looked good since he made the move down to the light heavyweight division. It was definitely an intelligent move. He had some success up in the heavyweight division. He's a very proven fighter as he came into the UFC from the Bellator and PFL fight scene, where he's definitely been in there with some high-level talent, guys like Josh Copeland, Jared Rosholt, Alex Nicholson, Vadim Nemkov. You guys know Vadim Nemkov is extremely talented, one of the disciples of Fedor Emelianenko. Been in there with Kelly Underson. There's some recognizable names on his resume, and he has some big victories. The big victories I would think that stand out the most are the knockouts over Josh Copeland and Jared Rosholt. Again, showing how dangerous he can be at times with his striking. Now, came into the UFC, lost to Andrei Arlovsky, wasn't the best look for him, but at the time, Arlovsky was just stifling everybody. It was really weird. He kept stifling all these young, talented fighters and winning decisions. He was knocked out by Tanner Bozier, a fighter that's, he's as up and down as anybody. And then, like I said, he goes to the light heavyweight division, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak now, defeating Maxim Grishin, OSP, and Marcin Prachnio. Not the biggest of names, not the most talented fighters these days. Fighters that are, OSP past his prime, and Grishin and Prachnio, it is what it is. But I just think that Philipe Lins has looked good in there, man. This is a guy that's been really grinding over at American Top Team over in Coconut Creek. And I think that he's just been definitely becoming the best version of himself. On the other hand, you got a guy in Ian Cutelaba who is such a good hammer, but he's not really the best nail. That's one thing that I definitely noticed about Cutelaba throughout the years. And he's also a front runner. He's a little bit of a front runner. He's coming off a first round victory where he smashed Tanner Bozier. We talked about how flaky Bozier is. And then before that, yes, he was broken down by Kennedy and Nzechukwu in the second round, was submitted by Johnny Walker. That was a horrible performance by him. And the Ryan Spann fight, he was submitted in the first round. He had the decision victory over Devin Clark. That was a very lackluster performance, a fight that he really held on for dear life to get that decision victory with his wrestling. And I don't know, man. The Dustin Jacoby fight, that was a fight where he 10-8'd Jacoby in the first round, and then Jacoby picked him apart for the latter two rounds. He was knocked out twice, right? Multiple times from Magomed Ankalaev. He had the knockout against Khalil Roundtree. Again, you talk about the ups and downs, man. Like, there's just a lot of variables going on here. Roundtree is a little bit of an up and down type of fighter as well. I don't believe he showed up at all in that fight. Cutelaba broke him down. Good for him. You take a look at how he was submitted by Glover Teixeira, and then before that he dismantles Gazmarat and Tigilov. That's another fighter that is extremely flaky and up and down. There's all these weird moving parts, but the one thing that I gather when you take a look at this whole puzzle and you put all the pieces together is that Cutelaba has very good wrestling. I'm not a big fan of his cardio, and he is a front runner, and I don't have a lot of faith in him as fights go to the later rounds. And I think that Philipe Lins will be live to even hurt him early in this fight. Of course, Cutelaba will be live to do his damage early on as well. But the reason why I like Philipe Lins in this spot is if he just weathers the storm early on, I do believe that he'll take over this fight in one way or another, whether he pushes and takes the 2 rounds and wins a decision, or he breaks Cutelaba down and gets a second round finish or third round finish. So, Cutelaba is a fighter that I always really wanted to back and always wanted to pull for him, but he has flaked out on me. He's flaked out on me so many times that I really just have lost faith in him. You take note, he's only 29 years old, so I know he's still sharpening up his stuff, and Philipe Lins is 38, but this is one of the upper weight classes, and fighters do get away with age a little bit more so, and I think Philipe Lins will be able to tee off with his boxing. He has a 3-inch reach advantage. He's a well-rounded fighter, and he's a big dude. He used to fight in the heavyweight division, and I don't think it'll be that easy for Cutelaba to just dominate him early on with the grappling and whatnot. And I think that Philipe Lins will give him some issues. So Philipe Lins is the underdog. He's as high as a plus 127 over on Jazz Sports. Opened as a slight favorite. The line going the opposite way. The action coming in on Cutelaba. And I just don't know how you have too much faith in a guy like Cutelaba. He may show up. He may not show up. I'm going to say that Lins gets a late finish potentially, or either way takes over this fight late. Drew Dober steps back in the octagon coming off a brutal knockout loss. He takes on Rick Glenn. Rick Glenn also coming off a brutal knockout loss. Both these fighters 34 years old. Both these fighters, in my opinion, are already as much of a refined version of themselves as you're ever going to see. I don't expect to see much evolution in either of these fighters. You know what you're getting from them. Drew Dober, an excellent Muay Thai fighter, good takedown defense, just a solid fighter all in all, a guy that will never hold the gold, but just a guy that can go out there and really put on a show for the fans and really defeat some of the best fighters in the world, but he will also take his L's here and there. Again, as we just saw against Matt Frevola, and came up a little bit short against Brad Riddell. That was a good fight as well, though. But he's also a guy that can go out there and starch dudes like he did against Bobby Green, et cetera, et cetera. You take a look at what Drew Dober has done throughout his career. You talk about some of the big names that he's defeated. The Rafael Alves knockout, that's a fight that's not to be overlooked as well. Alves, a very dangerous and durable fighter. Knocked out Terrence McKinney as well, a very dangerous fighter. Knocked out Alexander Hernandez. Knocked out Nasrat Haqparast. He was the underdog in that fight as well. The submission against Beneil Dariush. Again, when you take a look at his losses, it's also worth noting he loses to high-level fighters. Frevola, Islam Makhachev, Brad Riddell, the version of Brad Riddell before he knew he was on verge of retiring, but still decided to show up to the cage. The loss against Beneil Dariush again. OAM. These are high-level fighters. A lot of knockouts scattered throughout his career. And, you date all the way back to his UFC debut, which was on the Ultimate Fighter finale against Sean Spencer. If you remember Sean Spencer, that was back in 2013, 10 years ago. Okay. And he's a solid fighter. His first victory came by way of submission against Jamie Varner, the former WEC champion. And listen, I just got a great deal of respect for Dober. And I'll say this much. I know both fighters are coming off knockout losses, but the fighter that alarms me more so is Ricky Glenn. He's had more flaky performances throughout his career. He's had some big time performances as well, but he's had more flaky performances throughout his career. I think that Dober is more likely to just jump back up like he's bouncing off a springboard and just get right back to it. I also think that he's just more of he's a better striker. He's a more technical striker, and I could easily see him being the fighter that lands that big shot before Ricky Glenn lands that big shot. Rick Glenn, he's had some moments here and there, but he's more of a fighter that's known for just being a well-rounded, durable fighter and could do a little bit of it all, whereas Dober could do a little bit of it all, but he is very good with his striking, and I think that's where he takes this fight here. So let me not go on too much more about this fight. I'll make it clear. I like Drew Dober here, and I think he gets the job done, and I think that he can easily get a knockout in this fight. I'll edge him getting a knockout in this spot here. He's right around that minus 450 to a minus 500 range. That's extremely high, especially when you're taking a guy that's coming off a knockout loss at 34 years old. That's a little bit of an alarming line. It's not a line that I'm crazy about. He opened up as a minus 353 on Jazz Sports. It's now a minus 482. I think that if I was targeting Dober, I would want him around that minus 350 range. Okay, I think it's a little bit of a risky play. Ricky Glenn will bring the fight, and listen, it's the fight game. Again, coming off that knockout loss is Dober. He can get clipped again with the shot. You never know. We've seen Glenn clip dudes in the cage before. I think that's too risky for me. But there's a very likeliness that Dober just dominates this fight and is just the superior fighter. And again, just mixing in that Glenn's coming off that knockout loss against my boy Christos Giagos. He's looking to be very vulnerable as well. Dober might just steamroll him, but the line's too high for me. I'm staying away from that. I'm sitting back and I'm enjoying a slugfest where someone's going to get finished. One of the more fun fights on the card, Alex Morono taking on Joaquin Buckley. Fight taking place in their welterweight division. This fight screams under to me. I do sense someone's getting finished in this fight. I have a feeling these guys are going to clash here. Alex Morono, one of the more perennial underrated fighters in the UFC, an extremely fine-tuned, well-rounded fighter, has that jiu-jitsu background and the grappling background, but his striking has really, it's just evolved so much throughout the years. He's a very tricky and unorthodox type of striker. He attacks from these weird angles, and he lands on guys, man. You take a look. He's landed 5.2 significant strikes per minute throughout his lengthy UFC career. That's well over the damage that Buckley's doing, or at least as the volume that Buckley's doing. I do believe that Buckley has more pop on his shots. And Buckley doesn't he doesn't absorb as many strikes as Morono does as well. And both men have been a little bit vulnerable as of recently to being finished. Alex Morono was looking great against Santiago Ponzinibbio, and then he got finished in the third round. He was on way to winning that fight. He would have now been on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fight win streak, and there would have been some real buzz behind him. I still think he has potential to get that buzz back if he gets a victory over Buckley here. Before that, he had a loss against Anthony Pettis. That was a fight that he should have took. He was knocked out against Chaos Williams. Again, just showing to be vulnerable at times, to be landing on with big shots. And dating all the way back to, if you guys remember this fight here, let me just pull it up real quick. This fight was overturned. Okay, the Nico Price fight, I do believe Nico Price finished him in the third round, or finished him late in that fight as well. If he didn't finish him, he almost finished him. Morono was up the entire fight, and Price landed that big shot on him. Something, it says not confirmed. That's a little strange there. I think there might have been some type of marijuana or something like that. Excuse me for not having the exact details there, but just know that Morono is vulnerable to being tagged, and I kind of feel that Buckley will be the fighter that lands that big shot here. But that being said, we just saw Buckley get countered by Chris Curtis in a nasty way. We've seen him knocked out by Holland. He gets a little overzealous in there at times. He goes out there and looks to land his damage, and he's there to be hit. And Morono could easily clip him with the counter hook. He has these crafty counter shots. I think this fight's going to be a slugfest. I think Morono is live here, but I like Buckley. I think that the drop down in weight was definitely the right move for Buckley, and I love Buckley's mindset. I listened to his entire episode on the Joe Rogan Experience. This dude is a legitimate fighter, nothing but respect towards his way. 24 professional fights. He's only 29 years old, and I think that he is going to be making some noise in this division. He's coming off the knockout victory against Andre Fiallo, and which was his debut in the welterweight division in the UFC there. So the Nasruddin Amavov fight, he showed the gas tank that he has, taken over that fight in the third round. Amavov's a very good fighter, and a great performance against Albert Duryov as well. Stuffing takedowns, brawling it out. And I think that he could use those skills there to defeat Morono. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage over Morono. And, I gotta edge Buckley, but I want to let you guys know, keep an eye on Morono here. Be careful. Morono is crafty and just tends to show up time and time again. All right, especially when you count him out. So right now, Morono's a plus 163 dog. You know, he opened as a plus 143. Action coming in on Buckley. I understand why the action's coming in on Buckley. He has the name. He has the polarizing personality. He's a talented dude. And I think people just think he's going to be a little bit too much athletically and size-wise and skill-wise. And I understand it. He's now as high as a minus 192, almost a 2-to-1 favorite. I don't know if I want to really fade Morono in this spot. Just something about this spot. I think this fight's going to be a little bit of a wild one, and I think I'm going to sit back and I'm going to enjoy that one. Be a little bit careful there. Morono is a crafty dude. Joe Pyfer taking on Abdul Razak Alhassan. And yes, that is Abdul Razak Alhassan. That is not Rashad Evans. Sorry for those of you guys that are disappointed. I know you saw that this was taking place in the middleweight division, which you know Rashad Evans did have some middleweight fights towards the end of his career. You saw the picture and you definitely thought that that was a typo and it should have said Rashad Evans. Even the age too. How old is Rashad Evans? He's probably in his early 40s. I mean, a lot of similarities there, man. That looks like Rashad to me. But Abdul Razak Alhassan, a fighter that is always very fun to watch, man. He's an absolute fight finisher, big knockout power. Same can be said for Joe Pyfer. I love this matchup here. I think you guys know what we're getting here. We are getting a finish. Abdul Razak Alhassan, a little bit more of a front runner as far as the type of fighter he is. This is a guy that tends to go out on his shield if he doesn't get the job done. Coming off a second-round knockout over Claudio Ribeiro. Did go to a decision with Buckley, but before that had the first-round knockout over Di Chirico. Did go to a decision with Malkoun, but was really just grinded out. That's the thing. Even in that fight, right? He blew his load early on, and he was basically gassed. Malkoun dominated late in that fight. And same thing happened with the Minor-Lizez fight. Gassed out early. Lizez dominated that fight, as it went to the later rounds. So when I say he goes out on his shield, he doesn't always necessarily get finished like he did against Chaos Williams. It's the fact that if he doesn't go out there and get that early finish on you, he really fizzles out and gets dominated. We've seen that a couple times. Again, the Malkoun fight, the Lizez fight. But we've also seen him go out there and knock dudes out. Knocked Tomosi out 2 times in a row. Knocked out Nico Price. Again, knocked out Alessio De Chirico, knocked out Claudio Ribeiro. He's a dangerous, dangerous fighter. I believe fighting out of Fortis MMA. He's been over there for some time, and he could easily go out here and knock Joseph Pyfer out. I'm telling you, this is a clash between two guys that are just very dangerous. But I do believe that Joseph Pyfer is much more dangerous. He's much more cerebral in the cage. He's much more calculated, and he has a great frame for the division. I think that Pyfer is a fighter that has some real promise. He is coming off that knockout victory against Gerald Mearshart, starched him in the first round, knocked out Alan Amadovsky in the first round. I believe that was his UFC debut. It was, and Amadovsky's nothing to talk about, but still, Pyfer just, you see it in his demeanor, you see it in the way he moves in there. He's extremely confident. He's a stud. He had the knockout victory over Ozzy Diaz. You guys remember that episode on DWCS where Dana White was raving about his performance. It was the only good fight on that show, that episode. And had the knockout against Austin Trotman, and that was coming off the very disappointing first performance he had on DWCS, where he went to post on his shoulder as he was almost being judo thrown by Stoltzfus, and his arm dislocated. It was nasty, but he's rebounded in a beautiful way. This is a guy that's been through some real adversity in his life. If you guys don't know his whole backstory, you could pull it up on YouTube. This is a guy that's very mentally tough, living on couches, going through some real trials and tribulations throughout his life, excuse me. But again, this is a fighter, man. This guy has a solid frame for the division, and I think that he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. The more he starts to fight high-level fighters in the division, higher level fighters, I think he's going to show to be a fighter that is potentially a top 15 fighter in the middleweight division. I think he has that type of potential. He has a 4-inch height advantage here, about a 1.5 reach advantage here. He's only 27 years old. So much room for growth. And I'm excited to see how far he can push it. Just know that Abdul Razak Alhassan is dangerous, especially early on. I think that Pyfer needs to show growth, or not growth. I would say growth. But he's shown to be pretty solid there in general anyway, but he needs to show growth in the fact that he's still young. You want to see him mature, and I want to see him fight a smart fight here. I want to see him just slow the pace down early on, clinch up against Abdul, wear him out a little bit, and then just dominate this fight in the second and third round. If it even goes to the third round, just look for a late finish. Don't look for that early finish. There's no reason to play with fire because you can get burned. All right. So yes, I like Joe Pyfer here. And Joe Pyfer is a big-time favorite. Opened up as a minus 303 on my bookie. He's now a minus 384. A lot of action coming in towards his way. And, it's I'm trying to say, as I'm stumbling over my words here, it's understood why the line's moving that way. I think that people know Pyfer's the real deal, and that Abdul, Razak, Alhassan, the more you watch his fights, you understand that you're basically betting on him to land that first round knockout, or that's first half of the second round knockout. He better land something early on, because he is going to flake out, and Pyfer's going to mix things up and dominate this fight. I like Pyfer, potentially a parlay piece, but try to get, maybe you're hoping that line comes down a little bit. Not too crazy, but the almost minus 400 line on him. I don't mind the 330 that's on Bet Online right now. Oh, nope. Updated line there, excuse me. He was at 330. He's now at 420. So a lot of action coming in on Pyfer right now. He's a minus 362 on Jazz Sports. Try to get something more towards the mid 300s if you want to parlay him, or you're looking for unders. You're looking for knockout props on Pyfer. I think this fight is a banger. Co-main event of the night. That fight's going to deliver. So those are the things you should be looking there. I will take Pyfer via finish, via knockout TKO. Grant Dawson taking on Bobby King Green. A very fun fight. But if you want me to cut to the chase here, I mean, you have a 29-year-old Grant Dawson who's creeping into the prime of his career and is looking so damn good, man. This guy's so dominant with his grappling. Taking on a 37-year-old Bobby Green, who was really living off some recent hype, off some fun performances. But, coming off a submission win against Tony Ferguson, and he actually went through some early adversity in that fight. Looked good against Jared Gordon, actually. I know he headbutted him, but he was looking sharp in that fight. Got knocked out against Drew Dober. Took that Islam fight on short notice, and was dominated with the grappling. Finished up very early on. And, I look at that Islam fight, and I see some similarities here, because I think Grant Dawson's going to have similar success with being able to use his grappling and inflict some damage on Green down on the mat. Now, it might not be as easy as I'm making it seem, because Bobby Green, he's a tricky fighter, and Bobby Green can have some success on the feet, especially. I think that if he can keep the fight standing, he could definitely have some success striking against Grant Dawson. But Grant Dawson is just going to be much more physically imposing in this matchup, and this is a dude that's creeping into his physical prime. His grappling's ridiculous. We saw it when he made his debut on Dana White's Contender Series. The pace that he pushed in that fight, I remember immediately as I was watching that fight, I said to myself, this is a guy that we got to take note of and we got to keep an eye on, because the pace that he pushed, I haven't seen a lot of fighters push that kind of pace. If you remember, you could pull that fight up. I mean, he just was stringing off takedown attempt after takedown attempt. He chains his takedowns together too. So even if you have some early success, or you have success stuffing that first or second takedown, he's just going to continue to push that avenue, and he will get you down to the mat. And he's a very dangerous grappler. He's nasty with the jiu-jitsu. He will sub you as well. You saw what he did to Mark Madsen, getting that third round submission, submitted Jared Gordon before that. Went to a draw with Ricky Glenn. That was the only somewhat alarming performance as of recently. That was a fight that he was up 2 rounds and then really didn't look good in that third round, right? Ricky Glenn got that third round, a 10-8, and that was the only performance you got to keep an eye on. But knocked out Leonardo Santos, submitted Derek Minner, who then they were training together, and submitted Michael Trezano, took out Julian Rosa. He's fought some respectable names. And the thing that I will also note is, ever since Grant Dawson made the move down to American Top Team, when he left James Krause and Glory MMA, as that whole thing fell apart and whatnot, it's almost like he saw it coming before it even did, because he left before that whole thing fell apart. That was such an intelligent move by Grant Dawson to go over to American Top Team. There's no question it made him a better fighter. He's so much more of a well-rounded, dangerous fighter these days, and this is a guy that could easily be fighting for the belt one day, okay? So just so you understand that, this is a guy that is, he's a guy that can be fighting with the Islams, the Charles, the Arman Sarukians very, very soon, okay? He's 29 years old. By the time he's 31, I think he's going to be an absolute force to be reckoned with. And he's only had 1 loss throughout his career, and that loss was to Hugh Poley, where he was knocked out in the first round. So can Bobby Green pull some magic out of his hat and try to land on him early and maybe shake things up. I don't see it. I think Grant Dawson's going to be an absolute leech on him. Just he's going to be all over him. And I think that Grant Dawson's going to actually get a submission here. I think a late submission. I think he breaks Bobby Green late. And maybe a TKO too. Maybe he puts him in a vulnerable position and can rain down some heavy ground and pound. Dawson's the real deal here. But I'll say he takes the back and pulls off some type of rear naked choke or something like that. Give me Grant Dawson to get the job done. Another big time favorite. He's a minus 384 on my bookie right now. Opened up as a minus 333. On Bovada, he's a minus 375, open up as a minus 300. So the action is coming in on Grant Dawson, and it's to be understood. He's the real deal, and I think he's just going to be a step ahead of Bobby Green. Bobby Green's outgunned here, but we'll see if Green can try to keep it competitive. I just don't see it. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Vegas 80. I'm just going to throw some quick and important parting words towards your way. I got some good ones lined up for some of these big cards coming up. I got some really good ones, but I just want to keep with our base here and let you guys know when you take some losses. I know you guys are sports gamblers out there, MMA gamblers and all that. When you take some losses, all right, you need to slow the pace down, because if you guys look to continue to chase your money, you will notice that you will always have your largest amount of losses in a concentrated period of time. All right, notice every time you guys lost, if you really are keeping track of what you're losing, you'll notice that you always lose the majority of your losses all at one point in time. You take an L and you start chasing and chasing and chasing, and it will seem almost like things are rigged against you. I mean, there's been times where I'm like, this is an absolute joke. You ever notice that? It's like these losses will come in that make no sense. The craziest things happen. These weird things happen. Then you have a fight where you're going to win and there's some weird DQ. It's like they tease you. It's like a never-ending string of weird events. I know that's happened to some of you guys out there. So when that's happening, slow things down. Don't look at your bankroll for what it was before you took all those losses. Slow it down. Understand you're working with the new bankroll, and you have a new account that you're working with, and just build that back up and target the right spots. Okay, guys? So make sure you guys are all being smart out there. You know, I know there's some tough stories I hear time to time, and I deal with some of you guys that bet a little wild, and be careful. All right, I don't want to see any of you guys you know, messing your lives up with this gambling thing here. So I hope all is well with all you guys. Please like this video for me, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Got a lot of content coming your way. I'll have Dana White's Contender Series out for this upcoming episode for sure. I'll have that out very soon. All right, guys, on that note, signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.